All right, so we're back. And, diving into something pretty interesting this time. You guys sent us this top 10 most racist celebrities list. And, well, let's just say the top ten's website isn't exactly known for its, academic rigor.
Right.
But it's got some names on there that, well, let's just say they definitely raise some eyebrows.
For sure.
So what I'm thinking is maybe instead of taking this list as gospel, we can kind of use it as like a jumping off point. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
See what it tells us about how people think about race and racism, especially when it comes to these big name celebrities.
Yeah, it's like a snapshot of public perception. Even if it's based on, user opinions and stuff, it's still interesting data, right?
Totally. So right off the bat, we got Donald Trump, number one.
Not surprising.
Not exactly a shock, given, everything that's been said about his views on immigration and race, especially during his presidency.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on why he, consistently sparks such heated debate?
I mean, his rhetoric really tapped into a lot of anxiety and, resentment, especially among, I'd say, certain groups of people.
Right.
People felt like he was, finally speaking to their concerns about cultural shifts and economic insecurity and, all that.
Yeah.
And then they saw his policies, like the border wall and the travel ban, as, measures to protect the country,
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, a lot of other people saw those same actions as discriminatory and, fueled by prejudice.
For sure.
So it's this really complex situation where, where does legitimate political discussion and racially charged rhetoric begin? It gets very blurry.
Very blurry.
Yeah.
And then we have Barack Obama.
Oh, wow.
First African-American president, also on this list.
Mm-hmm.
This one honestly threw me for a loop. The user who put him there just says, quote, go through his quotes, end quote.
Wow. Okay.
What do you even make of that?
It's tough to say for sure, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, it definitely shows how differently people can see racism.
Yeah.
It's all subjective, and it's based on people's, personal beliefs and experiences. Like in Obama's case, some people might criticize his handling of like racial profiling
Right.
or police brutality, and they might say, he didn't do enough to address systemic racism.
Yeah.
Others, they might have a problem with specific things he said about race and interpret them in a certain way,
Right.
So it just shows you that even with someone like Obama, who a lot of people really admire, there can still be disagreements about what racism is and how it shows up.
Totally. It really seems like context is everything.
Yeah, definitely.
Next up, we got Hillary Clinton.
Okay.
And the comments about her talking about how her views on race have changed over time, which I guess makes sense, right? Like societal norms evolve.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like what was considered okay to say or do, decades ago is now totally unacceptable. Think about, just the terms we use to talk about people from different backgrounds, racial and ethnic backgrounds.
Yeah.
It's totally changed.
Constantly evolving, right?
Exactly. We're learning, we're reevaluating,
Yeah.
So when we look at people like Clinton, we got to think about like the historical context, when they said those things.
Right.
Doesn't mean it's okay, but it helps to understand like how language and attitudes change over time.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into some specifics here.
Okay, yeah.
Paula Deen is on this list because of, allegations that she used racist language at work. What makes her case, what stands out to you about her case?
Well, it's interesting because there's this big contrast, right?
Yeah.
Between her public image, the whole Southern hospitality, traditional cooking thing, which people associate with, warmth and being inclusive. And then you have these accusations that she created a hostile work environment for Black employees.
Right.
And it creates this dissonance that's hard to reconcile.
Yeah.
It really shows how public image and private behavior can be totally different.
And some of the comments about her, they even talk about like her appearance and how she grew up.
Wow.
Which I found really disturbing. It's like they're trying to justify their perception of her based on like these superficial things.
That's really dangerous.
Yeah.
Like judging someone based on how they look or where they're from, that's just prejudice,
Yeah.
And it reminds us that racism isn't always obvious. It can be subtle. And we got to be careful about those biases we have ourselves.
Absolutely.
We can't just rely on stereotypes. We have to look at the evidence at what people actually do.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit.
Okay.
Mel Gibson. well-documented history of anti-Semitic remarks.
Hmm.
One commenter even points out the irony of, him directing the Passion of the Christ
Right.
while holding those kinds of views.
Oh, all right.
So, do you think this hypocrisy is what makes his case so, fascinating?
I think it adds a whole other layer, for sure.
Yeah.
It raises the question of whether someone can actually change after saying offensive things.
Right.
Can we separate the art from the artist?
Right.
Or should we think about their personal beliefs when we see their work? There's no easy answer, and people are usually divided on this.
Yeah, there's always more to the story. All right, we still have a few more names on this list.
Mm-hmm.
Ready to keep going?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Let's see what else we find. Yeah, this list is all over the place. Like, we've got Shaquille O'Neal next. Yeah. And, I mean, he's usually seen as this, fun-loving, larger-than-life guy.
Right.
But some people are calling him out for stuff they see as racist, especially towards, Asian Americans.
Yeah, I saw that one comment specifically mentioned him, making fun of Yao Ming.
Right.
The former NBA player from China.
Yeah, yeah.
And they were saying that Shaq gets away with that kind of stuff because he's, famous.
Yeah, it's true. Celebrities often have this, shield,
Yeah,
that lets them say and do things that regular people wouldn't get away with.
totally. It's kind of double standard.
It is. But it also shows how much power they have,
Right.
how much they can influence what people think.
It's a tough one, for sure. Okay, then there's Justin Bieber.
Oh, wow.
One user just straight up says everything about him is racist.
Wow. Great.
Harsh. But another user defends him, saying, he apologized for using that racial slur a while back and that he's changed.
It makes you wonder, can people really change?
Right.
Can we hold someone accountable for their past,
Yeah.
but also recognize when they're trying to do better?
Especially when it's someone in the public eye where everything is, magnified.
Exactly. Everything they do is under a microscope.
Speaking of which, kind of interesting to see Spike Lee on here.
Spike Lee.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
filmmaker.
Yeah.
Known for, dealing with race and identity in his movies.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it?
It is. But it goes
Yeah.
to show that art can be interpreted in so many ways.
Yeah.
What one person sees as a powerful message about society,
Yeah.
another person might see as problematic.
Right, right.
It reminds us that even with the best intentions, art can trigger strong reactions and start conversations.
Yeah.
And that's not always a bad thing.
I guess that's the point of art sometimes, to make you think and feel, even if it's uncomfortable.
Exactly. To challenge us.
Oh, okay. Now for something totally different, we got David Duke,
David Duke. Oh.
former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah.
And one user asks, how is a literal KKK Grand Wizard not higher on the list?
Yeah. I mean, it's a fair question.
Yeah.
Given his history of, white supremacist activism.
It's a reminder that blatant racism is still out there, and that some people have these deep-seated prejudices that they're not afraid to promote openly.
Yeah, it's disheartening. But we got to acknowledge it's real.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, then there's Ted Nugent.
Ted Nugent, the
Yeah, the rocker, conservative activist.
known for his, let's just say, controversial views on, well, a lot of things.
Gun control, immigration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems like those political stances are the main reason he's on the list.
It shows how politics and race can be so intertwined.
For sure.
His rhetoric often taps into these anxieties about, culture-changing national identity.
Yeah.
And that can come across as racially charged.
Especially to people who disagree with him politically.
Exactly. Yeah.
It feels like this list goes beyond just celebrities who said racist things.
Mm-hmm.
It's also people whose actions or beliefs are seen as problematic.
Right.
Even if they haven't necessarily used, explicitly racist language.
I think it suggests that people are becoming more aware of those subtle ways racism can show up
Yeah.
in how people act, their attitudes, even their political beliefs.
Right. It's not just about catching someone using a slur.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing the underlying biases and the systems that keep inequality going. It's complicated for sure.
Super complicated. So what do you think is the main takeaway from this list?
It definitely gives us a glimpse into how differently people view race and racism.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that these conversations, they're rarely black and white.
Right.
There are so many factors involved, like personal experiences, cultural backgrounds, political beliefs, all of it.
And the fact that it's about celebrities adds another layer, right?
That's sure.
I mean, they're not just entertainers, they're also influencers.
Right.
What they say and do can really affect how people see the world.
Absolutely. They have these platforms that give them a unique opportunity to shape the narrative
Yeah.
and influence public opinion, which means they have to be mindful of the power they have.
For sure. Going through this list, I'm struck by how hard it is to judge any of these individuals, like definitively.
Hmm.
It seems like context matters a lot, and there are usually multiple sides to the story.
That's why it's so important to look at these discussions with a critical eye and be willing to consider different points of view. It's easy to get caught up in the outrage,
Yeah.
or condemnation. But to really understand, you need empathy, nuance, and a willingness to listen to voices that might challenge what you think.
That's a great point. So what should we do when we hear accusations of racism?
Hmm.
Whether it's about, a celebrity or someone in our own lives?
The first thing is to just pause
Yeah.
and ask yourself some questions like, what's the evidence?
Hmm.
What's the context? Am I jumping to conclusions based on my own biases?
Right.
It's about being thoughtful, informed, not just rushing to judge.
And how can we avoid contributing to that, cancel culture thing
Right.
where people get condemned so quickly without, a chance to explain themselves?
It's about remembering that people are complex
Yeah.
and they can change. We should hold people accountable, yes, but we should also be open to the possibility that they can grow,
Hmm.
that they can learn and feel genuine remorse.
Yeah.
Condemnation without dialogue, it rarely helps, and it often just makes the division worse.
So true. Okay. Ready to tackle the last few names on this list?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's see what we can learn from these last few.
All right, so we're down to the last few names on this top 10 most racist celebrities list, and it's definitely been a wild ride.
Yeah, no kidding.
Okay, so we got Logan Paul here, and it seems like it's not just about that video he made in Japan, the suicide forest thing.
Right, right.
Some people are saying like his whole attitude towards Japanese culture is a form of racism. So I'm curious, what's the difference between just being culturally insensitive and actually being racist?
That's a good question. It's definitely a fine line sometimes. Like cultural insensitivity can come from racial bias, right?
Right.
But I don't think every time someone's culturally clueless, it means they're racist.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have to look at like what they meant to do and how it actually affects the people they're, targeting. With Logan Paul, yeah, people thought he was disrespectful and sensitive,
Mm-hmm.
but whether it was racist, I mean, that's up for debate.
Yeah, I guess it's not always so black and white.
Exactly.
Okay, speaking of controversial figures, we got Charlie Sheen.
Oh, wow.
One user mentions a recording of him using a racial slur, but someone else is like, surprised he's even on the list. It's like all his other, personal stuff has overshadowed this.
Yeah, Sheen's a good example of how your whole reputation can affect how people see you. He was always in the news for like addiction,
Mm-hmm.
his behavior, you know. So maybe those racism allegations just got lost in the noise. It's a reminder that you can always separate these things.
Right, right.
They're all connected.
Okay, then we have Paris Hilton and Kelly Osbourne.
Okay.
And the stuff about them seems to be mostly rumors, not actual evidence. Is this just like celebrity gossip gone wild?
It shows how powerful rumors can be, especially now with social media.
Oh, yeah.
Things spread so fast, whether they're true or not. It's hard to know what to believe.
Yeah.
So you got to be really careful about the information you see and don't spread stuff that you're not sure about.
Good advice. Do your own research, folks. All right, last one. Juliana Rancic.
Juliana Rancic. Okay.
The TV personality. And the user who put her on the list says she makes stereotypical comments, but they don't give any examples. It's hard to even know what they're talking about.
That's why it's so important to be specific when you're, accusing someone of racism.
Yeah.
Vague stuff without proof, it's easy to ignore or misunderstand.
For sure. Well, we've been through a lot today, from presidents to reality stars, chefs to YouTubers.
It's been quite the journey.
This whole top 10 most racist celebrities list was definitely interesting, even if it wasn't, the most scientific thing.
It was fascinating. We saw how people's views on racism are complicated. Influenced by personal experiences, backgrounds, how society is changing. It's a conversation that needs nuance, being open to different points of view.
So what are the big things you hope people take away from this?
The most important thing, think critically. When you hear someone's been accused of racism, celebrity or not, ask yourself, What's the proof? What's the context? Is there another side to this story? Don't jump to conclusions.
That's such good advice. Thanks for walking us through all this. It's been, well, it's been a lot to think about.
It was my pleasure. Remember, knowledge is power, and we all have to use it wisely to make things better.